Welcome back to the official Atari Games podcast. This is Jason here, and got a bunch of special guests here from our friends at Digital Eclipse, here to talk about Wizardry, Proving Grounds of the Mad Overlord. I am joined by Ian Sherman, Senior Engineer. How's it going, Ian?
It's going great. I'm excited to be here.
Also joined by Nick Bruty, Art Director. How's it going, Nick?
Very good.
Awesome. Thank you for joining. And also joined by, I only have to say the last name once, but here it is, Justin Rosenthal-Kambic, animation lead.
Yes. Thank you. That is me. How's it going, everyone?
Awesome. Thank you for joining, everybody. Now, before we jump into it, got a little bit of a housekeeping short one for you. First of all, if you're listening to this, thank you. Would really appreciate a subscription. If you haven't done so yet, you can do that on any podcast service of your choice. Also, review us, iTunes, Spotify. 5 stars are preferred. Honesty is also preferred, but they can be both. I always say it. You know, you can give a 5-star and then give some nasty feedback below it, but the 5 stars will really count. So, go and do that. Say some things, and that would be greatly appreciated for all the algorithms. Moving on, though, join the Atari and Digital Eclipse Discords. We'll have those links below. Buy Wizardry, because we're talking about Wizardry, Proving Grounds of the Mad Overlord. But guess what? If you like what you see /hear, you can go buy it right now. It is available on Steam, GOG, Switch, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X and S. Also, on the Atari side of things, I mean, this is all Atari, right? But we got NeoSprint coming out June 27th. If you haven't pre-ordered it, wishlisted it, then get on that. Do the thing. June 27th. It's coming out on basically everything. And it's actually already out now on the Atari VCS. So if you got one of those, you haven't picked it up yet, get on it. Fellas, we're here. We're talking about Wizardry. This game, we'll get into the origins. I would expect a bit of a history primer. I know we only have about an hour. The history primer in its totality would probably take about 3. But before we look back, I want to look somewhere between then and now. I want to know from each of you, what is your favorite non-Wizardry dungeon crawler?
So when you say dungeon crawler, do you mean like a first-person sort of grid-based game like this? I mean, I can give a lot of answers to this question.
Yeah.
My favorite non-Wizardry one.
Ian can answer.
Yeah, let's stick to first-person. Yeah, the closest resemblance to Wizardry, because I got one in mind. Okay. Go ahead.
Well, the Grimrock series is pretty good. I think my answer is going to be something from the Etrian Odyssey series, though. I think that, it's sort of a toss-up between 3 and 4. Both had their strengths and weaknesses. I think I liked 4 a little better, so I'm going to say Etrian Odyssey 4.
Okay.
My confession is I haven't actually played one.
You might get 2 of those answers right now.
All right. How about dungeon crawler adjacent?
Honestly, I can't think. I was more into this from the art side.
Okay, fair enough.
Because I was very much in fantasy in the 80s and reading the fantasy books, and that was my big appeal to actually working on this project.
All right, we'll get back to that later. So I'm definitely gonna ask about that. All right, Justin, what do you got? For me?
I'm also gonna go slightly sideways on the question and say Darkest Dungeon, because that is a very relevant connection all the way back to Proving Grounds. But that art style from Darkest Dungeon, just like that sold me right there. And then the very, very old school punishing type of gameplay just like demolished me because I was not really prepared for that kind of experience. So that was that.
Awesome. Good choices. As for myself, you said Etrian Odyssey, so I was originally going to say Persona Q. Because I love the Persona series, and that's basically what if Etrian Odyssey was Persona. But because you said Etrian Odyssey, and I want to give people more diversity if they want to see more of the stuff, I would say Shin Megami Tensei Strange Journey is the one I would bring up, because that was really the first. I'd say that's the first one of these games that I actually got into on the DS, and man, that thing was awesome. And just the mystery of it and the dungeons, crushing difficulty. Really, really cool stuff, though. And awesome monster design, which is as all the Shin Megami Tenseis do. So yeah, thanks for entertaining me on this on that little warm-up question here. And now let's talk about what we're here to talk about. Let's talk about Wizardry. So I want to, I started with that warm-up question because, well, this is ultimately like the granddaddy of all those things, right? So who can give me the best history lesson on
I can try. Of course,
Ian.
we can't do everything justice here, but the original Wizardry was, you could argue it is maybe one of the first sort of dungeon crawling games, like you called out. It is for certain the first blobber. A blobber is a term for a game like this where you control a party that's represented as a single first person viewpoint that goes around a dungeon like this. So first party-based dungeon crawling RPG was released for the Apple II in 1981, and we were lucky enough to get to work with it and do it. Nick's having an exciting moment here.
Yeah, sorry about that.
We were lucky enough to be able to get to work with it and sort of throw on a fresh coat of paint and bring it to a modern audience. Now, our approach to this game is a little bit unique in that this isn't, we sometimes throw around words like it's a remaster or a remake or what have you, but we actually started building it from the ground up from the original Pascal source code. So we took that code and we ported it to C++, and then we integrated with Unreal Engine and put this fancy graphical layer you're seeing now on top. So it's technically a port of the original game. And all of the underlying math and mechanics are preserved kind of one-to-one because of that. Now, of course, we've made some changes to it, some quality of life changes that modern audiences would come to expect, but that gave us a nice foundation to fall back on because, at Digital Eclipse, we really consider ourselves sort of preservationists and historians, and we want to make sure that people who, we're presenting the game in the historical context in which it exists, and we're presenting it to a modern audience intact and as is. Now, everything we've changed substantially in this game, we made sure you can turn off. So you can toggle some switches in what we call our old school option menu, which I think you can probably pull up while I'm talking about it once you're done dealing with this gesture. It's in the pause menu. And you can pick from the modernization version of a particular change, the new version, or just turn it off and have the original experience. And if you turn all of these off, I'm not going to say it's 100% the original experience, but it's like pretty freaking close. It's like 97% the original experience.
Yeah.
In terms of influence, you mentioned the influence of this game a little bit, and not only did this influence like blobbers, but it kind of influenced the modern RPG in its entirety, including and in particular the Japanese RPG. So if you see things like in combat, how it's presented with like windows and turn order and all that stuff, that was a heavy influence on games like Final Fantasy, on games like Dragon Quest, on games like Pokemon even. And Justin mentioned earlier, which is a great analogy, Darkest Dungeon, that tonally is very similar to this game. So it's the inspiration for games like that, or games like Dark Souls even. It's sort of harkened back to he called it brutal. We try to stick away from calling it brutal, but it is sort of there's a permanence to your actions in the game. And one of the things we like to suggest to players who aren't familiar with Wizardry, who may be jumping into the first game, like Darkest Dungeon is a good analogy because the sort of story of the game is you're leading a party of adventurers into this dungeon and you're trying to recover an amulet that's been captured by an evil wizard. But the story is about how the amulet is recovered. It's not necessarily about any of your one characters. And I say that because more likely than not, your characters are going to die during the course of this, and they might not be recoverable. You might need to choose to continue with different characters. So don't fall too in love with your characters.
Yeah, that's always a tough one. And even now, I don't believe you can turn that off here, right? Or can you turn off permadeath?
You cannot turn off permadeath. That is still part of the game. Now, there is some adjacent features you can turn off, which is originally, if your party wiped in the dungeon, there was a chance that a character would just immediately die permanently. We have an option to remove that aspect of it, but they're still, their dead body is left in the dungeon, and you'll have to mount a rescue mission to go recover their bodies and bring them back to town, or cast clerical spells to bring them back from the dead. And all of those options, the temple in town and the spells you cast, have a chance of not successfully resurrecting them.
Yeah.
And if that happens a couple of times, that's how you lose your characters.
Got it. So when you're going into a game like this and you're creating something from the ground up and you're creating these modifiers, how did you decide what to modify and what to leave as is? And was there anything that was kind of left at the cutting room floor as like, yeah, we wanted to give this option, but yeah, that was taking things too far?
That's a good question. So, as you know, Justin and Nick were not super familiar with the original. I played the original, but not on the Apple II. My first experience was with the NES version of this. And during the course of development, I played the Apple II version. But, initially we would get together and everybody was playing the games and we were talking about, well, what are the pain points? How's this genre evolved in the years since this was released? What can we do to sort of bridge the gap between that and the modern audience? And that was a starting point, but we also released this game in early access in September of last year. And we got a tremendous amount of useful feedback from the community at large saying like, yeah, well, we don't like this. You should fix X, Y, and Z. So we incorporated some of that feedback in our development plans. It was in early access just on Steam and Good Old Games.
Right. Got it. And now I think the biggest question, I mean, we got a couple artists here. So the biggest question I have to ask is, when you start, I'm actually going to jump into the dungeon here or the maze, let's say. And how do I bring up the, is it
bestiary?
Okay.
No,
so what I'm bringing up, the classic version,
okay.
Right? So this is, if I ignored everything, right, and I just had this open, this is effectively what the original game looked like, right? Like I'm playing it on an old Apple II or something, and it is just
let me field that before the artists jump in. They should definitely talk about this, but This was sort of the first thing we got going. I said we did this as a port of the original game, and once we had completed that port, this is what you saw. This is the original game drawing the way the original game draws, and it was like keyboard driven and all that stuff and everything. Then we built up on top of that. But you can pull this up at any time during your playthrough, and it's always in the lower right corner. In fact, we had it mostly in the game for debug purposes, but everybody we demoed to or showed it to, they're like, that's really cool. You should keep that. So we did.
Yeah, it's really awesome. So I got to ask from the art side, how do you determine what gets created to layer on this? Because it's kind of the closest thing you could have to a blank canvas without a blank canvas. And I think, as you guys at Digital Eclipse deal with a lot of remasters, that the fans of old stuff can be quite particular about.
Yeah, it's funny with this because at first, your imagination runs wild and you want to do all this intricate stuff and very elaborate stuff. But as you get to know the game better, or how the maps are put together and how each map cell is generated, it's actually quite limiting because when they originally made the game, they didn't have to think about how the art would actually work here. But when you actually confronted with the physical properties of the map, how the map can spin you around in any direction and it has to look exactly the same as if you haven't moved. That means you can only draw unique art in a certain way. It has to always be symmetrical and look the same. So at first I was going too elaborate. And then as Ian kept explaining to me, no, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. And it's all puts you in a very tight box. And so you go, I can't really do that much. So I'll at least try and polish that art up. So we got more freedom here in the battle arena that you're looking at right now, where we decided to take you out of the map. And obviously you need a large area to be able to display all these characters. And that just gave us a little more freedom there to be a bit more expressive, which is why it sort of veers away quite a bit from the corridors that you're in. And it'd be nice if we had many more battle arenas. So hopefully, if this game is successful enough, we can update that, do something more exciting.
Right. Is there just the one battle arena? I haven't.
There are two.
Oh, there's two. Okay. Cool. It's more about the enemy design, right? So.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, when we started there, we looked at the original art from Jin Sumi, if I get his name correct there. And that was like one of the bases. And we looked at the other versions out there, which obviously pretty limited back then with 8-bit graphics. And we had our outsourcers who'd be building this stuff. And so we just used that as a kickoff point. So we have a sort of identity of the style of character. But then they would go forward, and for each character that we had, they probably did like 5 or 6 different versions for us to look at. And then we would dial in on one that we felt, best represented it. And we did that with each character. And that's another thing where, when they're making the original games and they're doing this little 2D sketch like you see there.
That's programmer
That's
art.
very cheap and easy to do.
Yeah.
However,
that's a bushwhacker.
Yeah, when all of a sudden you've got like 90 odd characters and you have to build those in 3D and animate them and design them, go through that, becomes very expensive. And as you say, it's like the main thrust of the art of the game, really. It's all about the characters. But it actually ends up taking up most of the budget as well to do that for the scale of game that we're making. So that's quite a challenge, and how can we reuse stuff, take certain characters that are similar to others and share animations and stuff like that. Because it is, it's quite a challenge. You don't think about that when you start, you're just porting up this very old game. But when you actually have to go through it, and we did go through it before with Medieval, where we porting up from a PlayStation 2 game, and the graphics were pretty simple, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh, that game also had about 80, 90 characters, and then we have to build this out. And some of those characters you might only see for a few seconds, but the cost of the project is actually quite high. So it's pretty challenging.
One of the advantage that a modern developer has, if they were to build a game from the ground up, which is of course not our approach with Wizardry, is they get to say how about we have 20 or 30 enemies, whereas we have to say well, there are 101. What are we going to do about that?
How do we do this?
How creative can we get in order to make this game happen?
Right. Yeah, you have this orc. I'm literally looking at this right now. I'm looking at 4 orcs, right?
Yeah.
And then you look at the original, and I'm looking at this it's like a Rorschach test of a bear holding a shield. Yeah. And now you're telling me this is an orc. And then you guys created this new design that looks much more classically orc-like.
Yeah,
orcish. Yeah,
and that's an example. So with the orc character, that was one of our unique characters, where there's only one orc creature throughout the game. So we were able to design that orc as we saw fit, and then animate that and just get that as a one and done type enemy creature. But for other character classes like the rogues, the bushwhackers, the highwaymen, the thieves, those are all different enemies, but they're all similar types. So like the mages, the fighters, there were a lot of characters, sort of classes that we decided to create groups for, in order to create a unified animation set that could be used across a wider amount of characters. I wouldn't have to kill myself animating, 9 different animation sets for thief characters, So we were trying to be creative and smart where we were able to be creative and smart.
The other thing that sort of informed the art as well was from the very outset, we're deciding what the look of the game was going to be, and because we're going for a classic game, but we were actually building it on Unreal. It could very easily look like an Unreal-looking game, but we didn't want that. We wanted to sort of have a sort of high fantasy 80s illustration look to it. Which, strangely, in Unreal, what we're actually doing is actually switching off a lot of the features that you'd normally use, right? All the nice glows and stuff like this. We're actually trying to get to just the pure textures and pure illustrations. And so the challenge there was actually finding artists who can actually paint in that style, because no one paints in oils anymore. Well, there's a few, but they're very sought after. We did try to get those guys, and it was pretty impossible. Everyone was solidly booked up. So I guess fantasy art is very popular out there, because we could barely even get any of these artists to return our calls. So it took us quite a while before, when we set up our sort of initial art tests for people, for our outsourcers to use, to hone in on the style. It took us many months before we found like the individual artists within that company that could actually still painting in that way. And that was like definitely sort of set us back quite a bit. But initially, once we got that moving, then things sort of picked up.
I'm going to interject for a moment and comment on the gameplay that's going on here, just to say that you've taken a real big risk going down to floor 2 here at the level you're at. So this could spell an unfortunate end to your gameplay here, which is okay. We can keep going after that. That is part of Wizardry.
That's right.
I just wanted to give you that warning. Also, an interesting thing we can talk about. Here's a technical sort of Easter egg, which is your character Odin was poisoned. He was poisoned by the creeping crud. Poison is a terrible affliction in this game, especially early, because every step you have a 1 in 4 chance of taking 1 hit points worth of damage, and Odin only has 12 hit points, so that's a lot of steps to get back to town. Now, poison is one of the only status afflictions you can receive in this game that clears automatically when you get back to town. And the reason for that is, in the original Apple II code base, the value of your poison stat was shared with some other information about your character. So it's not actually a true status, and it's cleared automatically because that information is reused when you return to town.
I'm like
looking at a lot of tricks like that in the era to make it fit in memory.
I'm going to frantically look to see if I have any. I guess items are all shared, right, between the party? Or does each person have their own items?
Each person has their own items.
Like there's no is there consumables or no?
There are consumables. Okay. If you've just rolled up a new party, I would say it's probably unlikely that you have any. They're pretty expensive to start with.
Right.
Latumofis is the spell to cure poison, but I think you're too low level to have it. So my recommendation in this circumstance would be pick which of your 2 characters you would like to live who are poisoned, because the other one's not going to make it back. There's a good chance neither of them are going to make it back.
Not with that attitude.
Make a beeline for the exit.
But this is the kind of old school fun aspect of the game where it's like this push your luck type situation here.
Oh boy!
Whoa, this is not going to end well.
Yeah, these guys.
We're getting the real Wizardry experience here.
They can run away. Everybody's going to run away.
One of the other fun things. I was going to say with the characters, the priest characters in the back who were shrouded in the darkness. That was our way of sort of hiding the characters before they're discovered fully. Because some of the original games had just full on different art to completely hide the enemies that you were encountering.
Right. So, wait, when I just ran away, does that mean they just literally just run?
Yeah, and that's another interesting technical thing to talk about is that was a decision I pushed for, and the reason I pushed for it is if you play the original game or you play any of its remakes from the era, like the NES version or the Saturn version or the PlayStation version or whatever, when you run away, it feels very random to the player. Like it seems like you're out of combat and then you're just somewhere else in the dungeon. But if you dig into the code, there's actually this really complex logic where your character is sort of searching through the dungeon algorithmically. Their goal is to try to move through at least one, but maybe multiple doors. That's how you escape your enemies. And I said, this is really cool. And the players don't really know that this is going on. So what if while it's doing this logic, we just make a record of the path you actually took to get to where you are. And we'll play this little animation of you literally running through the dungeon, because effectively that's what you're doing. But it didn't, as I said, in the original, you would just appear somewhere and you wouldn't know where you are.
And it is a somewhat randomized, just sort of like turn tail and run. So it isn't a get out of jail free from a dangerous encounter.
Right. So I guess the tactic, this is good, because for people who are, unsuspecting people entering the maze and they don't really know what they're getting in for because they're used to these, these more slow burn tutorials. We're gonna get you in here. Don't worry about it for the
all
first
the way
couple
down
hours
throughout the game.
That said, The exception, and I brought it up before, would be the Shin Megami Tensei, where I did die in the tutorial playing on hard in Shin Megami Tensei 5.
Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to bring up in that, like, the design of this game it's about patience and about mitigating risk. So, like, for example, one of the ways we accelerated you actually just getting into the dungeon is when you start a new game, you can automatically generate a party of level 2 characters, and that'll sort of get you over the hump. Or you can roll your own. If you want to make your own characters, they'll start at level 1. But a level 1 character in Wizardry is maybe not tough enough to stray very far from just the entrance of the dungeon.
Yeah.
So with your level 1 characters, you might want to take a few steps and have an encounter or a couple encounters, and then head back up and recover your health and your magic points.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, well, there you go. Two of my party bit the dust. I thought I was going up. Yeah, I mean that says going down. So I guess I was trying to get back to town. Clearly did not make it.
You did not.
I guess we're just gonna see how these 4 handle themselves.
Well, good luck.
Although it seems like, what kind of tips can you give me at this point?
Well, I can navigate you out of the dungeon.
Okay.
Back row characters are probably not going to be very good at fighting kobolds, but since you're already level 3, probably half of them are going to run before it matters. So this is a fairly safe encounter.
Yeah.
It's cool. What stats would you suggest people prioritize?
Well,
in the early game, at least.
Probably strength for your frontline fighters, vitality for everybody, and agility. Strength at very high numbers, 16, 17, and 18, just adds straight damage to your melee attacks, and that can really unlock the effectiveness of your fighters there. Vitality, also at high numbers, will increase your hit point rolls as you level up. You don't immediately get more hit points, but each time you level... this is a good thing to talk about, is... how hit points work in Wizardry, because a lot of people get very mad about it when they get rolls of like 1 over and over and over. So every time you level a character in Wizardry, your entire hit point pool is re-rolled. And if the result of that roll is higher than your current hit points, you get the higher number. And if it's the same or lower, you get exactly 1 hit point. So people are like, why do I get 1 hit point over and over and over? Well, that's because you had a good roll and you're making worse rolls. So you're actually still pretty well off. It's just not growing as fast as you used to. But the goal for that, I think, from my understanding, is it kind of normalizes the health of your characters over the course of your adventure, but it can result in a couple of outliers where either you have a character with very low health and very high health, low character health will eventually make a huge jump and sort of catch up. Agility determines your initiative order. So if you can go before monsters, that's super useful.
Well, yeah, of course, naturally. Yeah. Oh my God, this is this is brutal. Oh, good, I surprised.
We got a surprise.
What would you do in this scenario? So right now, for listeners, I have basically you're supposed to have a party of 6. 2 of them are dead, and they're not coming back. So I got a 4 on 8 fight right now.
You're absolutely fine. I'm not panicked about this. You have a surprise round. You can use, just attack with your front row. Which character's in your back row? You might want to cast Catino to put one of those groups to sleep. But again, the minute you start combat, half of them are going to run away.
Okay. All right, let's do that.
The orcs are
all right. I don't have anybody who could cast spells. My 2...
Oh, your thief's in your back row. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you're still probably okay.
Yeah.
I do like this kind of hide and ambush tactic.
That is a feature that we backported. That is something that was added in later versions of Wizardry 1, but did not appear in the original. So that was feedback that actually came a little bit. I mean, we were talking about doing it beforehand, but that was part of like the Steam feedback is like people missed this feature from the later games. A lot of people say like, oh, my thief is very useless. I think your thief is invaluable because all of the best gear in the game you get from opening treasure chests, and you really want a thief to do that. Otherwise, they're kind of low hit point and they're not really great at combat. So this gives them something to do from the back row rather than just like the way normally combat works in Wizardry is your front row can melee attack your characters, and your back row must either defend or cast spells. We also added another new feature, which is the inspect action, and that's tied to our bestiary. And Justin mentioned it a little bit earlier, but there's sort of this system in the original game where you first encounter an enemy and you may or may not identify it. In each round you fight the enemy, you might identify it. We sort of expanded that system and added levels of permanent knowledge you can acquire about your characters. So if you push, looks like L2 here, according to your prompts, you can pull up the enemy card.
Oh, okay.
And
Got
this
it.
is, so
Yeah.
once you've identified an enemy once, we'll show you its name and the group size and the amount of XP it's worth. But if you choose that identify action, you have a chance of gaining more knowledge, and eventually you'll fill out this card. And this is useful for, like, one of our design philosophies was, well, there's all this information under the hood that's really relevant to your strategic decisions in this game, but you wouldn't know anything about it, right? It's all hidden information. We said, well, does it need to be hidden information? We can just, bubble that up and present it to the user. The joke I like to make is like, what's the difference between a long sword and a short sword in Wizardry, according to the game? And the answer is, well, one costs more than the other, and that's kind of all you knew. So you want to go through that door to get back to, you're headed the right way.
There we go.
Now.
This looks more correct. And the maze design is always the same. It's not randomized.
That's correct. So if you have maps from the original Wizardry, they will function in our game because it is the same game. We did add one of those old school options, although this one's kind of special. You can only select it when you're creating a save file for the first time. Some of the later versions of the game, like the NES version, the Saturn version, PS1 version, had different level layouts, and you can choose from the classic designs or the modern designs, like what you're familiar with.
Right. So that's kind of that's kind of the option at the beginning that they tell you. So the console version was the Saturn version, right?
There were a dozen, but not for 20 years.
Okay.
So this is the first time anybody, at least in the US, has been able to play the original Wizardry in a very long time.
Oh man, just lost another guy.
Yeah, undead kobolds are a little bit scary.
Yeah, they're not going to run.
They don't run. They hit hard. They've got lots of health.
It's like almost my entire original front line is now dead. D. So when looking at the art, I did make it back. 3 of them did make it back. You said I was only going to get 2 back.
Congrats.
I call this a win. Then this is pretty good.
We did make a tweet. I'm sorry. Let me say something real quick, and you can ask ours. We made a slight tweak to the early revival costs for characters to let you get back in the fight a little quicker. These used to be very expensive to revive characters at almost any level, and I think below 5, is another old school option you can turn off, but it adjusts those numbers so you're more likely to be able to resurrect your characters early on.
So is it worth reviving them, or should I just leave them dead and then just get new guys?
Well, at level 3, I would roll up new characters, but it depends on how attached you are.
I mean, they were there from the beginning, and the beginning was not that long ago. So let's take a quick look at that.
If you wanted to make new characters, you can move the dead characters off to the side, so to speak, right?
Yep.
And continue with new characters and always come back to resurrect them later. Is that correct?
Yep.
If you felt that was a way to go.
All right. So you guys, hey, you remember me? I'm back. Right? Yeah. Something like that. Like, all right, cool. All right. Yeah, I think that's worth looking at that a bit. So if I want to recruit some guys, then I go to the training ground.
So if you want to create a character, you go to the training ground, yes. We've also added a new system, again, which you can toggle off if you're not interested, to recruit pre-constructed characters from the tavern. And the reason for that is, in case you didn't make a secondary party and you got your party wiped late in the dungeon, you can just hire some people and try to go rescue them.
Right. So, all right, let's go through this creating a character situation. So I got 5 classes here. I want to know from each of you, what's your favorite class?
Well, you're looking at lineages right now, so it depends on what kind of
lineage, I guess. Yeah, let's start there. Yeah, right, lineage. Sorry. So, human, elf, dwarf, gnome, halfling.
I think your fighters are dead, right? So, good fighters are humans and dwarves.
All right.
Humans are more balanced, and dwarves start with more strength and vitality.
So let's start with the dwarf then. I like a dwarf. You know. I can relate to a dwarf. Short. That's what I'm trying to say. A short guy. So, All right, cool. And now if I'm going to make this guy, so you're saying my fighter's dead, so I should be putting more stuff into like strength and vitality.
Yeah, I generally just focus down strength until it's maxed for my fighters, and then vitality next.
And again, I don't know, Ian, if we need to speak to like the points needed and like the way that that system is set up in order to suggest players like what stats they need to invest in order to access those character classes.
Yeah, so there are, I think, 8 character classes in Wizardry. 6 of them you can make from an initial roll. And each has a certain amount of points required to fulfill the classes, and they're sort of broken up to like basic classes and advanced classes, and every time you level, your stats change, so you can actually change class, but changing class will reset your stats to very low. So it's people really like making the more advanced classes. They're a little more interesting and a little more powerful than the basic classes, but you don't need to. I usually play through the game with the basic classes.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what. There's almost 2 schools of RPGs, right? One, which is that you can kind of grind and level your way and brute force through a game, right? And then there's others where it more like adapts to your level. So while you might unlock more features, it doesn't necessarily make it easier.
Right.
Where does this fall on that scale? Like, would I be able to just grind out and then push my way through with my like original?
Oh yeah, like I play lately, but you know, I suppose I've put a lot more hours lately in this game than maybe anybody. But I take the starter party and I just go for it. So you totally can do it. A lot of my focus has been on doing the game efficiently, though. So your mileage may vary.
Yeah, it's also critical for like balancing systems, right? Yeah. You don't want people to just have to rely on just grind. Grind on these scared goblin guys for about 3 hours, and then you can move forward to the second.
Just circle within those first 10 blocks, and you're good.
Yeah, exactly. Now I got a choice here of alignment: good, neutral, or evil.
Alignment has actually very little impact on the first Wizardry game. The important things to know about alignment is good and evil characters won't pair up in town. There are other ways to get them to pair up. So you want to mix good and neutral characters or evil and neutral characters, but you can't really easily mix good and evil characters. Good characters will encounter friendly enemies on occasion, whom you can just bypass. So if you're looking to avoid encounters, a good party is better for that. Evil characters get cooler gear later on, gear that only evil characters can wear.
Didn't know that part.
This is I just put Ian in my party, so I just created Ian. So now I can. So now I don't want to add them. I'm going to do that. Got to go to. Clearly, I haven't spent.
You want to go to the tavern to add them?
Tavern, add to party, Ian. All right, Bento. Sweet. Out. Actually, I'm going to replace Odin. I mean, these guys, they're still... I should probably replace these other 2 characters, right? So I can go to the inn and I could like hire... Oh, to tavern, I could hire some people, right?
You could.
Recruit. All right. So let's recruit some people. Let's get... I got some money here.
But there's also... Are there any free characters at this point, or are they...
Maybe not. I would bet if you kept checking, you'd get a free character.
Yeah.
Low-level characters are free.
So what is the difference? So I see like a diamond, a square, a circle.
Those are the icons for your class.
Okay, those are the
so that's shorthand, but they also, the text is also there.
Okay, cool. So let's see. What would you recommend me picking up then? I got my warrior slot filled. Or my fighter slot.
Who else went down?
My ideal party for early Wizardry is 2 fighter types, a cleric, a rogue, a bishop, and a mage. Some people will argue you don't do the bishop. The bishop can identify items you find in the dungeon for free. You don't need to take them into the dungeon to do that. They level kind of slow, but they do eventually get both cleric and priest spells. So I like bishops, but some people don't like bishops.
All right, here's a cheap bishop. I just got the most expensive mage, and then there's a 200 coin bishop Oswald. I'll pick up this guy. Why not? All right, cool. Now, let me, that's my party. Odin's dead. Sybil. And then we got Oswald. All right, cool. Now I got a party of 6 again.
Sweet.
So should I mess around with this order? What do you think?
Yeah, you definitely want your fighter types in the front and your squishy casters, maybe also your rogue in the back.
All right. So my rogue is, I think I have that right now, right? No?
Well, I know you made Ian a fighter, right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Ian goes in the front.
Oh, right. I forgot that I forgot that I only gave him 2 vitality. I was like, but why is his health so low? Oh, that was bad.
Well, he's also level 1, so
yeah,
true. Yeah, that's
that
right.
will change.
All right, cool. All right, let's see what we got. Let's go back into the maze we go. Yeah. Now, what from the art perspective? How much of the art from later games, because they didn't all look like this, right? Like they did bring art into the later titles of the game. How much of that influenced the design, like retroactively?
Not really at all. Didn't really check out any of the later games visually.
Okay.
Well, a lot of them were based on the Junsumi art.
Yeah.
So.
Right.
Yeah. But like, say the town, were obviously before there was just a handful of lines to look out for the buildings. That was just one area that was like, oh, let's expand this out visually at least, because just like the battle arenas, it gives us some freedom to actually give it a little style.
Yeah.
So everything was sort of created from scratch there.
And I think right in the original, the entrance to the maze was like originally outside of the castle keep or something to that extent. It was outside. It was on the edge of town. Wasn't that correct?
So on the Apple II,
like the manual,
I think it was a limitation of the size of the menus they could display, not technically, but just in terms of usable space.
Mm-hmm.
So there were like 2 locations you could toggle between, and some of the options were in one and some were in the other, and we just sort of merged them together for ease of use.
Yeah.
Very cool. I got to ask, like, what kind of any interesting dev stories that you want to share along the way? Like, I don't know, some things that were more challenging than you thought they were going to be in undertaking this project.
Well, I got a million of them for you.
Perfect.
Again, I'm the programmer, or one of the lead programmer, one of the programmers on this project. So all of my stories are going to be very technical in nature. But one of the funny stories I like to tell is on the Apple II, it's a 16-bit console, or a console that can do, a piece of hardware rather, that can do 16-bit math. So all of your stats, or many of your stats, can exceed the maximum value of a 16-bit number. So like your experience or your gold or whatnot, they all are larger than can be represented by 16-bit. So the original source code had a long integer math routine they would do. They would store it in 3 16-bit integers and do some math on that to do the calculations of a larger size integer. Now, modern hardware, you can do 32-bit math, you can do 64-bit math. So when we were originally doing the port, some of those I was just straight up replacing with 64-bit math because it simplified everything greatly. Now, where that went south is the experience you're rewarded for defeating an enemy is not fixed. I mean, it is fixed, but it's not like data. It's not something they put in a table somewhere. There was an entry for experience in a table, but it's unused. The way experience is calculated in this game is it looks at the properties of the enemies each time you complete a combat, and it calculates based on the properties of the enemies how much experience they're worth. And the reason that's relevant is people who have played the original know there's a handful of enemies that seem to be giving a lot of experience. They're like giants is a famous example of that. So when I first made these changes, I would go through and I would fight enemies and I would, see what kind of numbers came out of the experience system, because it was one of those examples of a thing that was the 48-bit, 316-bit math that I replaced with the 64-bit math. And suddenly the giants and the couple other enemies, they weren't awarding so much experience anymore. So I went back to the original source code and I found that it actually has an overflow error in it. Like the outsized rewards you get for those enemies are not intentional. It's a bug, but I had to recreate the bug so that the same numbers would come out of our system. That was a fun thing to find and fix.
Yeah. It's like staying true to the original experience of the game, whether or not it was the actual intent, but it became the actual experience of the game.
Yeah, it's cool. I gotta ask now that so now this is out and it's like a modern, and anybody can play it, right? So this is the modern version of the OG uh, dungeon crawler first person game. Would you suggest people jump into this as their first one?
As their first one? Ooh, that's an interesting question. It can kind of go either way. I guess it depends on, like, you got to go in with the right mindset. That's the key. Like, I've seen some people, like, I've watched a lot of people stream this game, especially during development, because that was fun. And you see the type of people that are like, oh no, I get what games are like in this era, and I'm going to embrace that, and I'm going to go in, and they have a blast. And there are people like, I'm going to have to pay attention, and I'm streaming and whatever, and it's like, oh, this is really hard, I don't like it. So, season to taste, really, on those fronts.
You can't really brute force your way through this game. And again, like Ian sort of said earlier, it's a game of patience and that risk reward, and how much are you gonna push yourself? How much deeper into the dungeon do you feel you can survive?
And you're going to make that choice wrong at least once.
Yes,
or twice.
I mean, I've done it. I've already done it once during this recording.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty cool.
But again, that's also that leads to the memorable stories that you have from your experiences with the game, of getting yourself in a little too deep and feeling like, oh, I've made the wrong choice, and you're trying to run, and you get those extra couple encounters that you thought were going to wipe your party, and like you just barely make it back to town alive. Like, those are those moments that I think a lot of the people who played these original games just stayed with them all these years.
I've seen a lot of stories on, like, the Steam forums, for example, that start with like, oh, I got to this point and my party wiped and I lost so much progress and this is the worst game ever and I hate the design. And then usually some people will be encouraging in that scenario, and then you'll see the original poster come back and like, okay, it was been a couple days. I went back in. I was able to get my party back.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the seminal Wizardry experience.
Someone's like, up, I took a break, I had a drink, and I returned to the game, and things are actually, thanks for the advice. All that.
Yeah. It's like when you hit, oh my God, Ian's dead.
Oh no.
No.
Ian just died. He was killed
bushwhackers
by
are also
a
a little bit
bushwhacker.
rough.
Yeah.
Yeah, clearly. Oh man,
they're good experience though. So if you can get through this fight,
I'm gonna. Only one left. There's 5 of them. So
yeah,
I think this guy's pretty good at blocking stuff. Oh, he just left.
Yeah.
All right. Fair enough.
He's out.
Fair enough. What there's a it's kind of last question on the game I'll ask, which is that a lot of, I think more and more now we're seeing games launch in early access. And I think that as this game just came out after a pretty good period in early access, what was the biggest takeaway in over the course of early access that ultimately improved that made the game better for it, or that validated, that justified that period of time?
Well, we kind of knew going in a lot of the pain points we were going to experience. It was nice to see, people express that sort of focus. Like, I mean, game development, as you know, is there's sort of a negotiation to it, because you have a finite number of resources and an infinite number of problems you want to solve. So you sort of have to prioritize, we're going to do X and Y and Z, and we're not going to get to do, W. But it's great to have direct feedback from players who are saying like, no, like, look, this is really important to them, so we'll bump that up in our priorities and make sure the things that they're talking about get addressed. It's great fodder for people who are trying to argue for certain features and don't get their way.
You're looking at me there. That's one thing I learned about this game, is actually the visuals are such a secondary part, or even like a third part, really, for people. They don't really talk about the visuals much. They'll make a comment on them, but really it's completely about the game itself. So Ian fought me on some extravagant graphic stuff I wanted to do, but wisely so. The effort needed to be put into the game and refining it, and that paid off.
Same. Any time that I'd see any or be forwarded any comment about a positive response from the animation, I was always like, yes, like, thank gosh, like it's always been appreciated, because again, like you just said, it was sort of didn't exist in the original games, and a lot of people felt like, it was slowing down their experience or whatever. But it was always good to see when people enjoyed seeing the animations and all of the extra art that we put in, because it was a lot of work.
Yeah, totally. It's definitely paid off in the game. The game looks awesome, plays awesome, and I think that it's pure gameplay, right? I think the first time I played, and I mentioned Strange Journey earlier. The first time I played that, it was kind of jarring because I was so used to all these other games. I wasn't used to these kind of dungeon crawling games where you wouldn't see your party; you just see a little, like a little thumbnail of who your guy is, and it's just the implication that there's an attack happening, right? And this was after I saw like all the crazy summons in like a Final Fantasy game, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, that's all really nice dressing, but the reward of overcoming something doesn't necessarily have to be tied to all this glitz and glam, right? It can still be done there. I mean, you play the paperclip game, right, online. That's just all text based, and that kind of gives you that same reward, even though you're not actually seeing the horrors that game is implying. So, I think what you guys have done here is a very, very happy medium between the preserving what was there and while also modernizing it in a very cool way. So it's good stuff. I'm going to stop the stream, but I got one more question I want to ask each of you, which I've been asking people more and more on the recent episodes, and that is, what is it that I think some people listen to this who don't know, what it's like working on games, and I like to highlight that stuff, especially while there's some dark stuff going on in the industry for sure. I want to lean in on some of the positive stuff. So let's start with you, Ian. You're a senior engineer. What is your favorite part of the job? What's the most rewarding part of the job?
Oh boy, but that's a broad question. Like to be an engineer.
The other way to think about it is like what part of the development process, what part of it do you get most excited about?
Well, sure. To be an engineer, you have to take some enjoyment from, like everybody's going to mention like, well, I like to get X and Y done and see it on the screen or see the user response to it, the player response to it. But really to be successful as an engineer, you sort of have to enjoy the art. People don't view it as an art, but there is an art to the structure of how you create the code and solve these kinds of problems. There's an elegance to it that I really enjoy trying to achieve or approximate anyway. Yeah, so that's what I'm going to say.
Nick,
I love the diversity. I love the first third of development where you can experiment and do all kinds of different things, right?
Amazing.
And you need to do that, right? Because sometimes you could like restrict yourself too much knowing the budget and how much time you have, but you need to have that breathing room to push out a bit and see what things catch. And like I've been doing this since like the mid 80s, and so many games are so different. The game I'm working on right now is complete opposite of this, working at a completely different tempo. I always had loved fantasy, and I said I'd read a lot of fantasy books when I was younger, especially in the 80s period, but I'd never worked on one before. And so, many, many years later, I get to step back into the 80s high fantasy for a couple of years and then step out into something new. So I love the constant turnaround of this industry. I think it's the most sort of vibrant, creatively forward-moving with tech as well. It's always just pushing forward.
I will comment. I think some of that is, I mean, that's broadly true, but we're in a very unique position at Digital Eclipse where we do a lot of the historical preservation stuff, but we do a lot of different things, and all of our projects are very small. Like this is one of our larger projects, and I would call this like a mid-sized project. So you get to like, you're never stuck doing the same thing over and over and over again. You're always learning something new, exploring something new, creating new gameplay and design, and that's a lot of fun. It's a good place to work.
Awesome. Yeah. Justin, what about yourself?
Well, as an animator, I just enjoy making stuff move, and bringing all of these things to life. And again, like being a lifelong RPG player, D&D, all that kind of stuff, it was a lot of fun to dig in and get to animate orcs and kobolds and chimeras and slimes and creeping coins, like all sorts of like bizarre fun creatures throughout this game, and just trying to figure out like the best way to present them to the players for the first time, so to speak.
Cool. Awesome. Well, all great answers. Thank you for indulging that question.
Also, one other thing that I just really enjoy about the industry is that the tools are getting better and better. And I don't just mean the AI stuff, which is a bit controversial on the artwork side. But in general, because we're not a huge team over here, we're a pretty small team, and so we rely on this stuff to actually be able to pull off the sort of richness and depth that we want from the final image. And every year that goes past, allows smaller teams to make grander and grander visions, and I think that's super cool.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I think it's very interesting to see what the literally independent market is turning out now, and what those developers are able to do with the tools available to them. Really, anything's on the table, right? Like the idea that, like, I was just playing Sprawl like a little while ago, that first person shooter. It's like and it's got like the slowdown features of fear, and it's got the wall running that you'd see in Titanfall, and it's just like this full-blown cyberpunk fast-paced first person shooter, and it's only developed by a small team, independent. And you're like, wow, this is great. The amount of people that this would have taken to make, and the amount of effort that needed to create all these systems, just like 10 years ago, would have been astronomical, would have been unthinkable.
Yeah.
And it's really
I like
cool.
Looking at that movie, The Creator, that came out recently, that has some of the best cinematography that you'll see around, and it's made from a camera you can get from Best Buy. Right?
Wow.
So that's pretty
Did not know that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's
crazy.
They used almost kind of video game techniques to actually build that.
Cool. I'm not familiar, so I'll have to check it out.
It's a Gareth Edwards. That's,
guerrilla filmmaker, but with
haven't seen it, but it looks cool. Good stuff. All right, well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Ian, let's go back to you. If people want to find you, follow you, are you on the social media?
You can find me on Twitter. A lot of times, like I said, you got the right crew here. Justin and I do a lot of streaming for Digital Eclipse on our channels. So if you pay attention to the Digital Eclipse media in general, you will find us. We have a monthly game stream we do, and it's sort of like this. It's very casual. We play some classic games and just shoot the breeze and talk about industry stuff. And we also do dev streams on there occasionally.
Awesome. Nick, how about you?
No, I'm a total ghost.
Perfect. All right, so you just have to find kids. You just have to find him, I guess, in a park or something.
This is the last time you'll see Nick.
I'm an Easter egg. Find me if you can.
Justin, how about yourself?
You can find me pretty much anywhere at JXRK. That's pretty much the handle that I use for the majority of the stuff. Yes.
And those any of these links will be below, by the way. I'll put those in the description.
Sure.
So as for myself, you can find me on Twitter at Jays of Doom. Also, as a reminder, please subscribe and rate the podcast. Get 5 stars, always preferred. Join those Discords. Buy Wizardry. Check it out. Wizardry, Proving Ground of the Mad Overlord. You always got to say the whole thing. You can't just say Wizardry. It's not good enough. So check that out now on all those platforms I listed earlier. Also pre-order NeoSprint, Wishlist it, do the thing. And thanks again, guys. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.
All right.
Sounds good. Thanks, man.